My name is Elaine Kicknosway, ELAINEKICKNOSWAY. No, I'm okay with Elaine. I live here in the Ottawa region, Anishinaabe territory. The place that I consider home is wherever my family is, and my family is in Denair. My family's in Cumberland House. My family's in BC, Alberta, and then there's chosen family that live in, they live out all over. And I was raised, as they say, I was raised in many homes. And I have a home here in the Ottawa region where I got married and I have our child, and he's going to be 20 soon. So my home, I've been raised in many homes. Then there's my adopted side. And in my adopted side, I was taken to their home in Saskatchewan. And then I was always running to get somewhere from their house to wherever I needed to get to. And I knew at an early age, it didn't feel like my home. So there was, again, this feeling of, this is your home now. Conversations to a little person. And you're always trying to convince that little person, this is your home now. And so there's a lot of convincing. And I left their home when I was 17. And I didn't really ever move back. And then I built my home the way I wanted to. I remember the apprehension. I don't necessarily remember what life was like. I have glimpses of the bush. I have glimpses of the dirt roads. I have more memory related to my apprehension because I was little. I was about 2.5, running away from a black car. And I recall, and that's that conversation of when you've returned home, they're given memories of you that you absorb into your memory file. So I was told I was a swing baby over the bed or in the corner of the room. I was told I was loved. I was told that I drank carnation milk. And I always had my siblings around me. And I believe that to this day. So when I see my siblings, there's a sense of comfort. Comfort that I didn't feel again until I returned home. So during the times away, it was very difficult to comfort me. What I've been told is at the age of 2.5, I was apprehended. What I was told was I went to a nearby foster home and my mom came, my biological mom came. And then they sent me down to what they say, I call it a puppy mill farm, or I was sent to a foster farm. But I wasn't treated well there. And then I went back to Prince Albert, they say. These are all according to the files that I have. And the stories, or what they say, they told us this, and they passed that forward to me. So I always knew I was adopted out of Prince Albert through the Adopt an Indian and Métis program. And then my siblings, my adopted siblings, shared with me and continue to share with me, like, the day you came, we picked you up, we were all there, I saved sticks of gum for you. And I remember I had my own bed. I remember that was big, because I don't recall a bed before. I don't recall like sheets before. I don't recall certain things. I don't recall sitting at a table before that family. So that was adjustment for a really active, traumatized little person. So I had a lot of learning to do, and I recall there was a lot of doctor's appointments. I recall there was a lot of dentist appointments, and then transition into how the new home, disciplined. So I recall my dad saying, she doesn't like to be yelled at. Don't yell at her. Because I would shake uncontrollably. Spacing. Like, I wouldn't like to be close to people. Like, my adopted mom would try to hug me. And I would just not feel comfortable. And I know that my siblings worked hard at helping me adjust into that home. And then, it just got faster and busier, and then church was introduced, and then new foods were introduced. And I became, or I think, set in certain ways, like head-to-head combat with my adopted mom was already set by the time I was 4. Because I yelled at her and I said, I wish I'd never been adopted. Because those words were already used with me. Even though I never, like the brain of a 4-year-old, I didn't know what that meant. And I remember it looked like she passed out. And the way she explained it later, because there's always later conversations of what I've done, she said it felt like she'd been shot through the heart. That's the way she explained that to me one time. And I was like, oh. But I started running away from that home at 4, and then again at 6, and then again at 7. By the time we got to Africa, because we moved to Africa when I was 10, I didn't run away from there, but I started using substances there. So that was my form of running away. And then there was different things that happened in Africa too. So I didn't always run away in Africa, but I definitely utilized substances to help me run. And then we moved here, and then Ottawa, when I was 14, I started running away from here. I'd go off for like a week, 2 weeks. And then I finally left when I was 17. But it didn't lead, because my substance abuse was pretty heavy by that time. So I had to go to treatment by the time I was about 29, 28-ish. Started really harm reducing. Quiet at first, because I was trying to The way I look back at it is like I was a kid that was used to being moved, because I was told, and these are things that I would like to confirm, but I was told I was moved to many homes before I got to that home, right? The final home, what I call the final home of my childhood. And I was pretty set I wasn't going to stay. Like I didn't talk in that home till 6 months. But they weren't told that I didn't speak English. Like, I only spoke Cree. I knew yes, no, fine, and bye. Those were the English words I knew. And by the time, I guess, 6 months had passed, I knew enough English. And my mom said I started to sing. And to her, she took that as she's feeling comfortable. And I kind of take that in myself by saying I was self-comforting myself. Because singing to me is a regulation practice. And I always wonder, like, did they sing to me at home before I left? Or was that already like within me to navigate how to like hum or sing my anxiety, sing my hurt, or navigate, like at such a little age, my grief. And then I started making up songs. Like once I knew certain songs, like I love you, over and over and over. I don't know who I was singing it to. I think I was singing it to me. And I think, because I see that in my son. He sings every day, but he was sung to every day. So I think that's that internal healing space that I just did. Like, how to self-regulate in this chaos, this world I didn't know. They didn't speak my language. They didn't know how to take care of kids in any of those homes. The severe neglect in those homes and the scars we carry because of the neglect and abuse. Because I didn't get any of that in my home. What they say within my biological home. I got all of that when I was in foster care. So I always think, if I hadn't been apprehended, like you go there, right? Like, what would have happened? Like, I'd have my language, because the way they treated us, if we spoke, is it's like choking the life out of you if you speak. So you sing it back. And you continue to take care of that place that you recognize and it's hard to go to. So I get drawn to comforting music within language. Every night I sleep to language songs that bring me home. And sometimes it's in Cree, even though I don't even know if it's my Cree, but it's Cree. So you can breathe. You breathe for that little person. You breathe for that teenager. You breathe for when they wanted to die. You breathe for when they wanted to live. You breathe for their oldness or growing into. I don't know if I'll ever feel old. You breathe for how my mother felt when I was taken. You breathe for my siblings. Because I was the baby. I was the baby girl. And I can't imagine. I don't know what that would feel like. So I think we're constantly taking care of that place to ensure that we can breathe through this and have a really strong heartbeat through this and hold ourselves. It's not so much shame, it's just consistently giving space for grief. But also that place of like, you're right, it happened, it's not going to happen to you again. So it's really navigating those fields of when it's feeling mistrust, misaligned in you, because it can come so back so quickly. And I've always shared, this is a good world. This is a loving world. And bring that back into myself. You know, like I have to remind myself I'm safe today. I tell everybody else, but I really have to work at that for myself. Yeah, that's a messed up story. I didn't really know about that. Like, some pieces still come back to me, like as they share too. And apparently they had like a final meeting with me in care, because we were in care. And I don't know if that happened in Prince Albert. I don't know if it happened in Flin Flon, or if I was brought back up, because they were apprehended too, but they're older than me. And I was, I think, 3 at that time, because I'd been in care. And they shared that there was like a final meeting set up because I was going to be adopted. So that transitioned to me not seeing them again. And so they set us up in a room, apparently, and I did a final gathering with my siblings. I believe it was just my sisters. And then they, again, put me in a car, and I was standing up, and they ran after the car. And I was obviously crying, and I dreamt of that for many years. And it wasn't confirmed until I went home in my 20s and just on the cusp of turning 30. And they said, yep, that's the way it happened. And I was like, okay, so I'm not going crazy. This actually happened. Like certain things that you dream about later that you think, oh, that's a really bad dream. Like, that's a messed up dream. And then you find out, like, that was true. Like, it's just like, right? So it to me, it validates like I was a kid. Because there's times in my life that it's so blacked out that I don't remember. Like, there's natural childhood that you don't remember because you're just little, right? But there's parts of my childhood, like I remember certain parts, and they're very painful parts. Because trauma sticks, right? But I think good parts should stick too, right? And there's reasons why I want body autonomy. You know, it takes me gradual, you know, and that's that conversation of like, I'll run to my sister and hug her. I'll still do it today. It takes me a while to do that with other people, right? When I would hug my mom, I would feel as my biological mom, because in my world I have these different figures that carry the same name, but they carry different feelings. So when I would hug my mom, and I didn't call her mom right away, I called her Jean, right? Because I had a loyalty, and I call it a messed up loyalty. So when I would hug Jean, and there's guilt with that because I called her Jean, I didn't always call her mom. I would feel this like pillows. and she would say, I love you, my girl. Those are the growing back into new memories. Like that I was always supposed to hear that. But in those foster homes, I don't remember good things. Like, I don't remember being fed. I remember I ate with dogs. I remember thinking as a little person, I'll just go hide underneath the porch and take, I think I probably had a bun or something. And I thought, I'll save my food with the dogs. And these dogs are like, I think that's a good idea. And I'd lose my food. And then I'd go back and I'm like, oh, where's my food, right? And that's traumatic as a little kid who's not being fed, right? And only feeling safety with animals, because none of the people or children I didn't feel safe with. There's this conversation in my story that they wrote about me that said I was close to a little person named Rosie. I don't know this person. I don't take a sense that I was close to them. I think it was just like as little people, we survived. And so she's like this figment. And I'm like, I wonder where she is. If they wrote about you, I don't even know if you're real. Like, that's that storyline that they keep on telling you, right? And when you came to the house, you had cigarette burns. When you came to the house, you had a lot of bruising. When you came to the house, you had impetigo. When you came to the house, you were dirty. When you came to the house, I think it was in the final house, like the pre-house that you went into before you were adopted. They were the ones that cleaned you up. That's what I believe. I don't know if that's true. But my mom, my adopted mom, said they must have loved you, or they must have cared for you, because they made you this dress. And I was like, I don't know. Because if they would have cared for me, I wouldn't have any of those marks. I wouldn't have any of those conditions. I wouldn't have any of those. Like, my hands are covered. Like, I remember looking at my hands as a little girl and like, why are they filled? And my legs, and I had skin conditions, right? When I was raising my son, he never had, like, he has born into skin conditions because he's allergic to things. But he never had any of those. He never had one wart. Like, he was always clean, always cared for, always loved and bathed and hair washed. And, you know, you hug him today and you can smell clean. maybe a little too much, because we might have passed on that teaching of you have to stay clean, because that was the teaching at the adopted home. You couldn't get dirty, you know. And if you did, you had to change right away. You couldn't even walk in certain rooms because you were dirty. So those are those memories that I remember, you know. And I'm still trying to piece my childhood together. Even trying to piece, like, even when I went to that new house. She remembers certain things, but she tells it her version. You know, my sister tells it certain ways because she remembers her version. My dad tells it certain ways, like, we noticed if I yelled at you, you'd shake. You know, and I recall the way I was, what they say, potty trained, because I wasn't trained. Like, I guess we went to the bathroom anywhere. I recall him, because I already had like this stance, this standoff with him. And I recall standing there, and I didn't ever want to go inside. There's purpose to that, right? And so I was always outside, running. I didn't like wearing shoes. I didn't like people touching me, especially my feet. And I remember it was like October in Saskatchewan. It's already getting really cold. The ground's really cold. My feet were freezing. And I didn't want to go inside. And he's like, Elaine, come inside. I know you have to go to the bathroom. Because, of course, as a little kid, you're getting squirmy, right? And I just kind of looked at him and I stared. And he's standing right there at the front of the house. And I remember I peed my pants in front of him. And I never did that again. He brought me inside and grabbed my arm. And he takes off his belt and he strapped it across the bed. He didn't hit me. He strapped it across the bed, and it made such a noise. He goes, you ever pee your pants again, that'll be your butt. I never peed my pants again. So already certain things, and they've apologized for certain things of their parenting, you know, because in their parenting, like, we were spanked a lot. We were, you know, and they might not say it that way, but in the role of the child, like, I remember being spanked a lot and yelled at, and their discipline was probably classic parenting of the 50s, 60s, or 40s when they were kids, like 30s, 40s. They just transferred it into the 70s. And then it kind of stopped by the time you're about 9. They stopped hitting you, you know. But they didn't hit like all the time. Like, that's a really warped thing to say, right? But yeah, different home disciplines. And I always like, how would mom have disciplined? Like, my bio mom, how would she have disciplined? And I'm always trying to bring that back. Like, how would she have disciplined me? I don't know if she knew, even if she knew, because she was sick, right? Like, my mom, my biological mom, had tuberculosis. So she was always in the TB sanatoriums. And that's why she would leave. And the way the child welfare wrote it was she abandoned us. She didn't have any family support. Like, today, you'd have family support. You have COVID. You have COVID. Of course we won't take your kids. You have tuberculosis, which is very prominent in the north. She lost a full lung because of tuberculosis. She only had one lung. And even that lung wasn't full. So I always she was a teenage mom. My grandfather was the hereditary chief, or like the leadership. And they took me when my grandpa was moose hunting. That's what I heard when I came home. So I always so if he hadn't been moose hunting, I always wonder, did they set him up? I always wonder that, eh? Because he was set up too. It's not just me or my mom. It's my grandparents and my aunties and my uncles. They were set up too. And who was behind that? Because you get pointed out at some point, and those are the names. When you uncover it all, those are the names. I want to know the names. I know the names of my social worker, who became friends with my adopted mom, and I kind of feel a bit jaded about that. My adopted mom was going for social work, and that's fine. Do your schooling. But I always wonder, why did you become friends with the lady that was a part of my apprehension, or part of my adoption of the adopted Indian and Métis? Why were you her friend? And why was I raised with her? I don't know if that was normal for adopted homes, to become friends with your social worker that brought the child to you, that then was raised with you as a child. I always wonder that, you see how messed up that was, right? And trying to convincing, you see my point of view, don't you? And that is still spoken today, because she's still alive and encouraged to go see. I don't necessarily know if I want to see her, because she worked for Adopt an Indian and Métis program at the height of when we were apprehended, to the height of when we were adopted out, at the height of even writing my story. And I always wonder, did you lie? Did you make up things? Right? I always wonder that. There's more to it, and I don't know how to tell this side, the adopted side, that was messed up. That wasn't right. You shouldn't have done that to a little person that said, I already know you caused harm. I think that's a part of this, like a prisoner of war. But I was a prisoner of the system, because I had to see them and go to their house and go do social things. And with this adopted family, and I'm still encouraged to see them. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. So as an adult today, I don't, I even have love for her. Messed up love, or because I have to love you, right? So that's that groundwork in my early years. Who do I really love? Really challenged at that place, eh? Is my love authentic? Because I've had to love these people that I was told to love. So that's one of my messed up places that I still really talk to my therapist about. What is my authentic love that has boundaries, that feels safe? Because I was raised to love people that I don't even know if I loved. I know I loved my family. I didn't love anyone during this time of foster care. And then being told I had to love these people until I left. And then there's this loyalty of love. Well, we raised you. We have more memories of you. We have more memories of your childhood. We have memories of your teenage. We have memories of your relapses. We have memories of this, memories of that, right? We were there when you graduated college, right? And I always like, yeah, but I don't even know if I invited you. So I have memories of, the choices that I made of who I chose to love too, that I fled, right? And so I said to my husband now, who I've been with almost 25 years, I'm going to do everything backwards, because how I've been doing it, I don't know if it's good for me. I can't do it anymore. So it's kind of like you gave up this big heavy coat, right? And I do love him, because I always tell him, I didn't know I could love like this. And that is a really nice place, because it's honest, it's truthful, sometimes uncomfortable, because I'm going into a place I don't know. And I know I have attachment issues. I know I have commitment issues. But I can't see my life without you. And that I'm really grateful for. Because you keep on waiting for it to end. This place of, it's going too good. Something's gonna happen. And you're right, natural life happens. Sickness happens. And that, that I think is that growing into who are you really? So I believe that, I've realigned myself as I'm continuing to realign myself back to who was Elaine always meant to be. If she'd been raised here, but she can't change that because she was raised here. And this is what happened. And I can't change that. But I can change how I do who I am today, right? I have a name. I have a picture. I know he's from Buffalo Narrows. I was told all these different things. I was told they met at the TB sanatorium. I don't even know if that's true. I was told his name. I was told he was Chippewa, but then I just met somebody from that community and they were like, no, we're Cree, we're this, we're that. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not that anymore. So it's always like, and then you go through this, like, did I nation shift, or was I told to believe something again? And that's not the fault of the person. That's not the fault of the knowledge person of the community, because he's being connected to, right? So now there's an interest, and I want to go to Buffalo Narrows. I just don't know how to yet. It took me, because I got a letter when I was 24 from social services that said my mom wants to meet me. And like many, I put that letter away. And I didn't go home till I was 29, 30. And they don't have a program or a reunification of how to get all the way home. I don't know even if it's like with one parent or with both parents. I was told my father died when I was 2. I don't even know if that's true. I just got a picture of him in 2020 for the first time. And then I look at him and I'm like, oh, that's how come I look like that. But I don't know any of his mannerisms. I don't know how he smelled. I don't know his favorite food. Like, I don't even know my bio mom's favorite food, so I guess. So there's still pieces that are untold. And there's, just like after my bio mom died, like I was like, I don't know where to stay now. Like I don't, and to me that was like, does that mean I can't go home anymore because she passed away? And so I actually asked my older sister and she just said, well, you'll stay with me now. That's it. You'll stay with me. Okay. So that kind of, so I'm always trying to navigate, like, how do I get over there? It's not to even just be acknowledged, but it's just like, this is where my dad's from. Okay. And maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll just drive and just say, okay, I went to Buffalo. Great. But that's that. How do you fill those pieces? Because what I was told is that my mom took me to Buffalo. My dad apparently held me. I was held by his family. Now, I don't know if they told him that was, like, he knew, I assume he knew that was his baby, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm always like, is that true? Like, I'm always like, because there's this mystical father. Like, I'm close to my adopted father, but there's this mystical father figure that gave me life, and I'm very grateful for that. But I know nothing of I don't even know if it was a love story. Right? There was 2 kids. Like, there's like Dora, my older sister, and then there's me. And we're from the same dad. Like, that's always the joke, right? Because there's many dads too, right? And that's that conversation of, we talk about our mother. Some of us talk about our dad because there's like 13 altogether of us, right? I think there was 15 altogether. But there was like whose dad was whose, and like there seems to be this mystical conversation with my siblings, like, oh yeah, and that's so-and-so's dad, and that's it. No. Or that was an American, and that was his dad. Or that was so-and-so, and your dad came from, like, we all seem to navigate each other's conversations of connection, because the connection is my mom. Because we were all carried within that womb. But our dad connections are sporadic. Some have fond memories of my grandpa, like my brother, my younger brother, George. He's got, like, they all talk about my grandpa. They all talk about my granny, because they were part of a large part of the parenting too. But this mystical father, I look at my husband like, that's what a father is. One that never leaves. And that's what, I probably told Dylan way too young, not totally understanding the impact. Because you see it, and I've always told him, never leave your kids. Never leave your kids. Be in their life always. And if you're not able to leave some sort of legacy for them to remember you. And sometimes it's said forcefully, never leave your kids. And I always like, maybe that was a little messed up to say that to him, because he was like, he's a teenager, he was a kid, he was this, he was that, right? But it stems from this place, because I don't know anything, and that's not his fault. Because were we told anything back then of legacy, or they'll want to know something about you, or they'll do DNA to find out who you are, like, right? So I don't even know where he's buried. I assume in Cumberland or Lacrosse. I don't even know if he has a headstone. So there's this, again, mystical being called my father, and I know a little bit, but I don't know a lot, and there's still like those pieces, like, and I always like, is it important now that I'm this age? Like, is it important? But I'm like, it is important, because it's part of me too. And I was just told, like, Cree and Dene. Oh, okay, that explains a little bit more now. I was always told I was Cree. They just didn't tell me what kind of Cree. And I didn't even know, like, as a kid, there was different types of Cree. So when I went home, they told me, oh, don't you know you're a Bush Cree? Bet you they didn't tell you that. So they were already, kind of knowing that I might not have been told very much. I would call her an auntie now, a very strong auntie involved in my life. And she would tell my Ukrainian mom, I have to take her to the Friendship Center. She's a little Indian girl, and she's going to come with me. And I'd go with that family. And that family took me to a variety of places, including Saskatoon Indian Friendship Center. So I saw my first powwow when I was about 6 or 7. And I was involved with like this, I don't know if it was like a welcoming ceremony, but it was just the kids. Like nowadays you probably call it Tiny Dot. But they did this ceremony with us. I don't know who conducted it because I was just a kid, but I was encouraged to dance, and that was my first time dancing. And I didn't know, like, I remember feeling because I was in my head a lot, like, how do I dance? How do I move my feet? Like I felt like a dinosaur out there, like I felt heavy feet, and I didn't know. And there's like kids just dancing all over the place, and we were encouraged to do this ceremony, and I didn't know how. I didn't even know it was called a ceremony. And then I picked up these little things, and I brought it back to Elaine Jessup. That was her name. And I was so shy, right? And she was like, I need you to, she said, talk to the elder. And that elder kind of joked with me, but he was like, I took him as an authority figure. And he's like, the one who picked up the most feathers or whatever we were picking up has to go up on that big table and give a big speech. And I just dropped everything and I hid behind Elaine. And she was so kind. She was like, don't worry, you don't have to go over there. And I was like, and then there was shame, like, I did something wrong, right? And she and my mom, my adopted mom, arranged for me to spend time with this elder. And I remember he gave me a like one of those like big chokers back in the day. I don't know what happened to it, but I used to wear it, and then I was like, I would feel shame, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to wear that, because I don't know if I'm allowed to be an Indian. Like even at that young age, and I remember I'd come home and I'd go to the Friendship Center and I'd come back to this suburban house where we lived, and blame them. Like, how come they get to be Indian and I don't? And there was no comforting. I wouldn't let her comfort me. You can't comfort me on that. You don't know what that feels like. To change or be absorbed into your race, and I know nothing about it. It's a foreign country. And even when I would see or spend time with Indigenous or Cree folks or go to the local reserve, like I remember one time we were playing on some hill, like just being kids, right? And it was summertime. And I remember some of the kids would look at me and go, "How come you don't go to school?" And I go to school. I go to school over here. And it only dawned on me like 10 years ago. They were asking why I didn't go to residential school. Because in the 70s, like in Saskatchewan, there was a lot of residential schools. I went to a white school. I was the only Indian. And I remember, I was the only Indian. I can't be white. So forget that you're an Indian started. Like, probably when I was about 5, 6. Because you can't be an Indian, you have to forget that part. Which is like huge about face from speaking Cree to English and then telling your little person of yourself in your own psyche, you can't be an Indian anymore. So everything you do, and by the time I was 16, I wore makeup that faded so much of my skin that I looked like a white woman. Like purposeful. And I remember putting on that stuff when it was the 80s, right? And I remember putting it on, like looking at myself. I don't look like an Indian anymore. Cut all my hair. It was almost all off. Curl it. Put sun in the product back in the day. It never turned blonde. I could never be a blonde woman. I'd be orange. Anything else to be an Indian. And did they deliver that? No, the adopted home did not always deliver that message, but it was always there. This is my Indian girl. I don't want to be an Indian girl. Right? And that word adoption. Oh, we adopted her. So there was a less than feeling with my siblings. And sometimes, because my mom's Ukrainian and my dad's a British man, they had Ukrainian darkness. So I felt I could blend in with my older sibling because he was darker. Because we would compare, I'm getting dark, right? But you wouldn't identify your darkness with being Indian. Well, I went to high school over here. I was pretty into my substance abuse by then. And I left by the time I was 17. And they don't really talk about heritage or identity. I wouldn't say I was bullied here, but I was bullied in Africa. I got beat up a couple of times. For whatever the reason was, I never totally understood. I got beat up by a young person named Patience, and I thought that was really funny. Patience beat me up. And then I went home and I told my mom. And she's like, what? And I was like, patients beat me up. Why? I don't know. She just approached me and said, I'm going to beat you up after school. I was the new kid at that school, you know, from a different country. Like, I was like, patience beat me up. Patience still beats me up in different ways. That word patience, not the person, but, you know, it's just one part of my childhood that still makes me giggle. But it was a boarding school, or it wasn't a boarding school, it was a private school. I had to wear a uniform. So by the time I got over here, I didn't really know what to wear, because Ontario I thought was really glamorous. It was the biggest city I'd ever lived in. And they had like Chatelaine and Vogue magazines. And so I'd get those, and I was like, I guess I have to look like these white women in their fashion. We weren't always in sports, so I just kind of filled my time with not so great things. and what they say, you know, smoking and smoking other things, or, you know, what they say, things to take you away, you know. Spend as much time out of that house as possible. So I went there basically to sleep. Or if there was family gatherings, I could do it for a little while and then I'd leave. And there's guilt if you left. So there's still guilt if you leave too long. There's always that drawback, like you have to come back. There's guilt related to if you leave too long. As opposed to, we're glad you're living your life. We're happy you're living your life. You know, there's always that trying to prove connection. Like, I know I'm connected to you, but I'll go in the way I want to. And I'm still close to my older sister in my adopted home. I'm pretty close to my siblings in my adopted home. So my sibling and I, Jill and I, we would go to school in Saskatoon on the bus, and I would sit with her. And she was pretty intuitive to me, like as a little person. And she knew that I didn't like being yelled at. Like, we'd get into like little fights, and she'd convince me to do stupid things too, like pick up that, do this, go over there. And then go tell my mom, like, Elaine did that. And I'm like, she told me to. Right? Like, we still have that today, right? So that's a good joking thing that we have. But I remember the same within Africa. Like, I would always be close to Jill. Jill and I were like, I guess, chummy, you know. But when we got over here, it got less and less. And when I got in trouble, I'd call her. I'd always call her. Just let her know I'm not doing good right now. She's like, okay. You know, because there was a time when I didn't talk to my parents, but I'd talk to her. You know, and my other brother, sporadically. My oldest brother, not so much. And I was living not so great. There was homelessness and crappy relationships, but I'd always call her, like, if it got really bad, you know. And back then it wasn't like, I'll lend you money. It was just like, I'll just listen to you. And, you know, she helped me with a Get Off the Street program here in Ottawa, because she was working, or someone was working, and she's like, all you have to do is go do something you like during the day and they'll pay you. And it's through a youth program. They didn't call it a youth program back then. And she's like, what do you like to do? Like, you know? And I was like, I like animals, or I like little kids. She's like, okay, Like, why don't you call a couple of daycare centers and, I'll help you fill out the paperwork, And she helped me with that. And that's how I became an early childhood educator, through the help of that daycare. It said, you're really good at this. What, have you ever thought of college? I was like, no, I'm a high school dropout. Well, you can apply as a mature student. So that led to this, and that led to that. And I was like, oh, okay. And then after I was done school, I didn't think I could go back. Like that warped thinking. That school's anytime. So then I finally went back. Then I finally went to school. Something dinged in here. Okay. So, and I'm still going to school. I don't know if it was called racism. It was just like looks, slurs. Like now, looking back, probably it was racist. It was a lot of bullying, a lot of pushing, a lot of getting beaten up. So in today's words, that you'd call that bullying. We had to take a city bus, like from the suburbs to the downtown school. That's where I went, the downtown school with my sibling. It was called an open house school. So it still runs today, but it was in the first couple of years, and it was a cooperative schooling. So I went there from grade 2 to grade 6, or grade 5 maybe. And there was a bully on that bus. And I remember she would rip my clothes, and I was like petrified to show my mom. Because it was, if you got dirty or you broke something, like you would get yelled at. So I just like, I don't like anything broken today, or I throw it out. Like, I don't want to see it, right? Or if it gets ripped, I was just like, oh, it's garbage. And that's messed up because I'm like, so I'm like, just calm that place that gets triggered. It's okay. It doesn't always have to be clean. Because I share, like I've been living with my husband 25 years, I share this environment with you, right? And you've got your set ways, and I've got mine, and our son's got his. And I don't have to be in control of this. I can be in control of how I react, but I'm still working on that so much. Because it's not fair. It's not fair to them or me. And that's a huge part of my self-regulation. Huge part. Because it's not fair to control this person, because I was controlled. So that's not fair to, and I'm always like, how do I undo all that? Even when it was the derogatory terms of what I was called, or being followed in stores, or followed at school, knowing because I was an Indian. I already knew when I was 6, never be caught alone. Never be alone. And so that plays on me even today. Like, how do I do independent stuff? Because I have such anxiety attacks. But my role is to do it independently. And so it's always it's such a struggle. Such a struggle. So now with modern technology, I need you to know where I am. And I feel safe for you only to know where I am. And I'll let you know where I am. But I don't need to know like Snapchat, right? I ghosted mode like right away. No one needs to know where I am. These are the only people that I allow to know who I am, or where I am. Because there's always that push-pull. And it's not just from that, but some of it stems from that. Never be caught alone. Never be alone. But as an independent growing up person, it's okay to be alone. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. How do I be alone? Because you're never alone. That's the thing, right? And I've still got to convince myself that. Because that's part of that isolation space, right? That is, and I it's like prisoner of war. It's such an isolated pit that can take you away. And that's not always fair to your own child, your own partner, or your own loved ones. So I'm constantly, and I can hear my sister, like, you're home now. You're not gone anymore. So I transfer that knowledge. I try and transfer that knowledge to others, and it's always internal. Like, you have to really believe that. That's that. And my anxiety is like my best friend. It's crippling because it's all in here, right? It's not here, but it stops here down. Oh, you can't go there. They gave you a look. Oh, you can't go there because someone had a tone. Oh, you can't go there, blah, blah. And you'll make up these messed up scenarios. Oh, they might want to rip your clothes. Oh, they might want to do this. Or they, like, it's so crippling. And so I was like, okay, I really need to, again, start working on my self-regulation again. Because it's not working. Right? Like, and I always tell Thielen, you take me to places that I didn't know I could go. I never knew we'd be walking along the highway. He told me this at 9. And I was like, I can't do that. My first instinct is I can't. Or I'm not allowed. I still have to talk to that place daily. Oh, they don't want you downstairs. Go, you gotta go. Some people call it procrastination, but it's anxiety-led. A crippling anxiety that you just like, I know I gotta constantly work with you every day because you are such a good friend to me. You stop me from... So if I put you down and just be grounded here, I know you're here, but I just need you like in a really tight ball, and I gotta throw you now. But I know you're like this bouncy ball, and you come right back and you stick on me, and then you'll creep back up to my brain. And then I stop talking. So I don't stop talking anymore. And then that rage comes in, right? That rage. Of course you can. Like that stemming, like it's such a, I don't know how to explain it. Like that's the best way I can explain this place, from this place to this place to this place, right? Did it stem from the racism? No. Did it stem from that incident of that little girl that sits on the bus and ripped my clothes? No. And she probably had a messed up life too. Like, why else would you pick on a little Indian girl on the bus that you sat with, that you chose to, like, she get on the bus, oh, you're here, sit down beside me. I don't want you to leave, or I don't want da-da-da-da, and she'd rip my clothes. I remember, like, one time I was so scared because I had this little coat. Like, I liked, because they were new. They were new clothes, God forbid. You got, Army and Navy clothes, right? And they were new clothes, and I could tie it up and cinch it. I remember she took the thing and she just pulled it. I was like, stop me. Like I was like gonna have a little heart attack. And I remember taking it home and like tying it up and My mom was mad. God, she was mad. How did you do that? You can do things, blah, blah, blah. My first word is boundaried. I had anxiety this morning because my mom was texting me. She knows where I am. She doesn't know where I am, but she knows how to communicate with me. I'm not always the one to text her or email her. Like I said, like my relationship with my adopted family was one that I was like a cantaloupe being put in a farmland. It wasn't anything like my territory. It was down in the southern Saskatchewan. I'm from Bush Cree area. A lot of water and black spruce and birch and juniper, you know. And I was taken to Africa, totally different territory, and then I was taken here. But my relationship is with my dad, I believe, has always been close, even though he's had his moments too. I feel a connection with him. With my mom, it's a topsy-turvy. I always think like those teacups. You're sitting in this teacup and you're sitting together, and now I sit in this teacup and she sits over here, and we're still spinning around each other. And sometimes I don't know if we ever turn it off to actually talk to each other. Like we just kind of yell at each other every now and again. And then she writes, "Love, Mom." You know. And yet if my bio mom said that, I would believe her. And I feel sad because this lady was also, this adopted lady, wanted to adopt a child and love the child. And she does still to this day. But I don't know if, I've never trusted it. Right? So I always think, was she set up to, you know, kind of going outside so I don't have to go inside? You know, I know I love her, but I don't know if it's real. You see other families like have a parent come and help and do this and do that. And I was like, so I send my husband a lot. You go do it. You go over there. You go visit. Right? Like even, you know, recently too, you know. So it's a really boundaried, complex relationship that I always think we were both kind of set up, and some of that's not her fault. So I have these empathy moments, but then it goes back to, I still don't trust you. And that place of, I still don't trust you takes over a lot of our relationship. Like she'll ask like simple things like, how are you doing? And I'm like, what do you want? You know, like that's messed up. If somebody else asked me that, I'd be like, oh, good, I'm great. You know, things are going well. And yet if she asks, it's like that whole distrust, you know, and that's not her fault because I'm a grown person. She shouldn't trigger me that much. But it's my stuff, it's not hers. She can still get my blood elevation up, my blood pressure's up. You know, just before I came in, she had texted me and I felt nauseous. So I have to go to the bathroom. Because that's how much it triggers. You know, but it's that reassuring, I'm okay, we're safe. She's over there. She's with my dad. My dad. It's always my dad. My dad. I take ownership to him. I don't take ownership to her, and that's not fair. Because she loves me. She loves Thela, and she loves Vinny. Oh my God, she loves Vinny. And Vinny's advocated for me sometimes, you know. Like when we were talking about the 60s Scoop and discussing what that was, they carry a lot of guilt. They, you know, like my dad, oh my God, my dad was so shameful. Like he felt so much shame. And I believe she did too. Like I chose to just see my dad, but I believe she probably carried that too, right? And so I had to reassure them, like, you raised me respectfully as best as you knew. You raised me with, oh my God, such unconditional love, you know, and still love me to this day. You raised me with bravery, you know. We went to so many different countries, and you raised me all through Africa. And when we were traveling all through Africa, all through Europe, all the way back to Canada, you raised me to see so many beautiful things that I didn't always appreciate, because that stopped me from seeing real life, because I stayed stuck. Plus, I was probably detoxing without even knowing it. That's what it was called back then. You know, I was sober for those 6 months. I was drug-free for those 6 months that we traveled. Nobody was talking about youth relapse and addiction prevention, or, you know, addiction and aftercare back then. We didn't talk about that, you know. And looking back, I was like, I was probably detoxing, you know. And I wasn't smoking, you know. It was only in Ottawa at the age, I think, of 15, I finally told my dad I was smoking. And he was like, well, you know, it's not good for you. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, how long have you been doing it? And I'm like, on and off since I was 11. He's like, well, it's not good for you. That's all he said. But you knew certain things you didn't tell my mom, or you're going to get it. Not get it like hitting get it, but just like attitude, behavior, so many groundings. I got so many groundings from this lady. Like, so many groundings. Because that was how she was able to react to these not so great situations, you know. And you think of missing and murdered now, and I was in some pretty not great situations. And then I come back. She'd like, are you okay? But she wouldn't say, are you okay? She would just like validly be angry. Of course I'd be angry too. Someone takes off, ghosts you for 2 weeks. That's what they call it now. But you're a kid. You're just a kid. You're 15, 16 years old. What the hell are you doing? Ghosting your own home. Who does that? No. They always wanted everybody to be treated the same. This one might sting. But I knew that their children, their biological children, were treated better. Like even when we went to McDonald's, like we had to sit in the car. Being a little person, you admire your older siblings. And I always felt I got ripped off. Like they got the better. or they got the better color, or they got the better meal, or they got the better, like that internal, you got it better. And I know that they didn't intentionally do that, because it was all the same. It was just a different color. It was all the same shakers, except I got a different color. But I would think in a little person's brain, you're better. My little McDonald's meal was better than that meal, or not as good as that meal. So it's always like trying to convince the internal side, you're good enough. And I would get my brother's jeans, the hand-me-down jeans that were patched, right? Because he ripped his clothes, and he wouldn't get in as much trouble than me. So I always felt like there was like this like a lot of observation always on me. Would you call that like disappropriating or disproportionate level of how we were treated? And the way it came to is because you're little, you don't know, they know more. Or that was the messaging. So I always thought I had to know it all. I got to know better. I got to know more. And that was the messaging. Even though they always said, oh, we treated them equally. They all got the same. But they never checked in. They never checked in. We all got the same shakers from Costa Rica. We all got the same this from wherever. We got the same thing from Jamaica. They got the same thing from whatever was coming back, because they traveled a lot, right? And they'd leave us. That was the other thing. They'd leave us with these horrible, well, I don't really like one was outright racist, the nanny. They called them nannies back then. And she was, I fought that one. I fought her. She dragged me in the house, that one. She was like, your parents said you had to be in bed by 7:30. And I'm like, I think that was the first time I started swearing, like when I was about 7 or 8. You know, I don't go to bed at 7:30, you know. And it was a weeknight. We were playing like tag outside. I was so mad. Like Saskatchewan in the summer, like sun doesn't go down till 10:30, 11 at night. But I knew she was in the wrong. And how do you explain to your parents that are in a different country you're being abused by this nanny? And my siblings saw some of that. And I don't blame them, but it's just like, that was pretty messed up for us to live through that shit. Like, we shouldn't have, again, be left. That goes back into that aloneness place. You shouldn't have left us. I know you were doing career building. I know you were doing this. And, because my parents worked for a third world agency. So they left. My dad would leave a lot. Then I'd be left with her. Okay? It's not a blame on my dad, but I didn't always feel safe with her. And then next thing you know, we're moving to Africa. Then I became exotic. Right? Like, what are you? Where are you from? I was Filipino, I was Greek, I was Italian, I was everything else but an Indian. That was just too hard to explain. Because then you had to explain, well, what are you doing with them? I don't know. That would be my first response. I have no idea. They're called my parents, but they're white people. Like even that, like that's so familiar for my response. I don't know. How do you feel? I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. Where are you going? I don't know. And I'm always like, yes, you know where you're going. Yes, you know what you're doing. You don't have to give that much power to that place. or her, you know, because there was like, I know she loves me, even with the XOXO on her text today. But I always feel like she's up to something. So I send Thielen now, or I send Vinny. You go see them. For me, it always feels guilty in her guilty tone. When are you coming to visit? Or when are you contacting your dad? For me, it's always a feel like I should feel guilty. Or I feel that I'm to owe them something. I don't owe them anything. Still kind of tender some days. Like I want to love them. Kind of like they didn't tell me how. Like they demonstrated as best as they could. This is what love looks like, right? And they were a family that, yeah, definitely raised 4 kids, you know, and tried to keep us all equal and to ensure that we kept it in the family. You know, does this storybook look? We're close. We're not close. We get together. We don't get together. We check in. We don't check in. Like there seems to be always this impression that we're a close family. This outside look of this storybook. Like I always think, you know, she always wants to talk about feelings, and why the hell would you want to talk about feelings? That's the work I do, right? Because my feelings are like tight, right? But I can go to people's feelings. I'm invited in to be witness. And that goes back to that old place again, right? Like, who do you really love? Like, do you know what your love and your authentic feelings really look like? And I just go back into that box, like, fine, I'm fine. That before I even had English feeling. I can feel it in Cree, I can feel it in song, I can feel it in prayer, and sometimes I can feel it when I'm totally grounded and I'm really in it. Then I'm like so grateful. Like you felt that. And then other times I don't trust it, what people say about me. Because I might not have remembered because I disassociated so much when I was a kid. Right? Like it was a lot safer that way. You know, don't feel it, don't touch it, don't even go there. It was safer that way for me not to be there. And she never abused, she abused in physical ways, but not sexual, like nothing like that. That was all done before and continued after with different incidents later on with different peoples that I would love to charge, you know. But as I tell her, like, I remember one time she asked me, like, what was it like in those homes? Because I must have had such really, really bad dreams. Really bad dreams, because I still have these nightmares. And I just, like, I'm frozen, right? And she's like, tell me what's the matter? And it was about the foster home and feeding the dogs and being thrown outside and like I was trying to describe that, and she was like, I don't know if she ever believed me. And so I was like all these different little cues, like I don't know if she really believed me. Like she wasn't told she had a traumatized child. She was told, she wasn't even told I spoke. She just assumed she saw a happy little girl that was happy. I was apparently a really cute kid. I'd smile, you know, take the cues or read the room. Like I already knew how to read the room. You know, I always know the way out. You know, I think a lot of survivors know that. We always know the way out. But I can't imagine, you know, like that's that part of that, like when you go to treatment and you go through the different steps, right? You apologize, right? You have to apologize for the shit you've done. And I have apologized to her. You know, I can't apologize for everything. But yeah, certain behaviors I've apologized for, you know, because that wasn't fair. And we were only named 60s Scoop like in the 2000s. And her attitude was there was just so many of us. There's just so many of you. Yeah, because you weren't checking to see if we had family to take care of us. Is that her fault? No, but I kind of, in a warped sense, like, you were becoming a social worker? Like, you must have known. Like, people got salesman of the year to sell us. Like, how do you sell a kid? Like, people are always like, oh, you were in a catalog. Yet, if you tell Canadians you put kids in a catalog, like a Sears catalog, you know, like, you sold us. And she fell for it. Even though she was going in it for schooling. Like, did she want to sell kids too? Right?
That's where the distrust comes from. You're never quite sure of the motivation.
Specifically hers. That goes back to, what do you want? Right? And that's not all hers to carry, though. That's not fair. For me, I don't think it was a successful adoption. Whatever that storybook says that this is a successful adoption. There was a time that I didn't even talk to them. I only spoke to my sister. I would say the adoption, sibling adoption practice between my sister and I was successful. It's been sporadic, you know, with the other family members. And I left that home when I was 17. It was a big fight, and I had been using, and again, I had ghosted them probably for 2 or 3 weeks and came back in, and like they had to change the lock to the house so I couldn't get in anymore. You know? So that was like, okay, I'm not allowed to go there anymore. But I shouldn't be stealing from that house anyway. I shouldn't be drinking all their liquor anyway. I shouldn't be right? Would I do the same thing? I probably would if I had a kid like that. But I would, like, we didn't put kids in treatment back then. Like, there was no treatment centers for kids, like us kids, right? Us teenagers. Like, we were just homeless. We were couch surfing, and we were, survival sexing and survival this and hustle and, can I crash couch surfing? I didn't know that was a thing. I just stayed there for a little bit, and then I moved here, and then I had a rooming house, and then I moved there, and then my sister helped me get into a consistent place, and it was living, thinking this is life, this is the way it goes. I'm used to moving. I'm used to moving with small amounts. Just take the basics, leave everything else. Grab a garbage bag, gotta go. I can still do that. I always have a bag packed. I gotta go. And my husband, he's always like, okay, I get it. You gotta go, don't you? And then I feel sad because I gotta leave you. Right? And I never want him to feel left out. Because he was raised in care too. He was raised in day schools and care and away, right? So it's always trying to convince each other we're going to stay. How do we stay put? Right? How do we stay put? And my son travels a lot. He travels in different ways. Him, I think I'm a little bit I'm always worried about him getting hurt. So I helicopter too much. So I've really, and my husband's like, he's got to go, let him go. And I'm like, no, he'll never go. He can't go. But it's okay for him to grow up. It's okay for him to do things. And I really talk to myself again and talk to my counselor and talk to the one of my supports, that's natural. That's always also that struggle. Is that natural? Is that normal? Am I normally supposed to do that? Like I question myself all the time. Like, is that what you're supposed to do when you're parenting? Is that what you're supposed to do when you're this age? Is that what you're supposed to do when you develop a relationship and attachment? Like, is that normal? Right? So and what I'm hearing among adoptees, breakdown in adopted families is normal. I don't know if there's success. To my adopted family, I went back to my roots. To me, I realigned myself back to who I was always supposed to be. And you'll come in as that natural, because you still don't come into the community. You only come into the community gradually, or if invited. You don't come on your own accord, right? And I remember when I was 26 and I came back to the city in March. I left a pretty violent relationship and I left with a garbage bag. And I remember they had a powwow at the Friendship Center. And my cousin was living here. I think we were about 27. She was like, so when you see an elder, you have to take tobacco. And I didn't know anything about that. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you have to go give them tobacco. Oh, okay. And I'm like, how do you know they're an elder? And this white lady was telling me about how to be an Indian. And she's a kind cousin. She's a very kind cousin. Very, very kind. You have to give them tobacco. Oh, okay. Okay. So I was like really stressing on that, like huge stressing on that. And I was like, so when do you know they're an elder? When do you know how to sit with one? I wasn't told anything like that. So so we go to the powwow, and they're like, and the elders will be sitting up here at the MC stand if anyone has any questions. So I was like, great. I got my tobacco and I have a question. And so I go up there and I'm thinking, this elder's going to tell me who I am, answer all my questions, like in this sitting. And I go sit with this lady named Lillian Pitawanakwat from Birch Island. She passed away now. And she's looking at me and I'm looking at her, and I just kind of throw her the tobacco. And I'm like, tell me who I am. And she's just kind of like, I probably like freaked her out. And she's like, oh, sweetie, you should go sit with more Indian women. You need to go sit with more Indians. And I just started crying. I'm like, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that. And she's like, I'm going to write down this new place just opened. It's called Aboriginal Women's Support Center. You should call them. And I was like, to me, that I took that as a rejection, like she doesn't want to talk to me. But she was just trying to be helpful and resourceful, and and my sporadic with the Friendship Center was like, I only play sports with you. I don't actually spend time with a lot of Indians here. I only play baseball because they had baseball back then. And that was it. So I was like, okay. And then that was my transition into community that got me into treatment. A white treatment, but it was still treatment. And I went to the only Indigenous addiction counselor here in Ottawa and had to do some heavy stuff. And then I worked with a northern, what they call inner child workshop. And then I had to go back the following year. So I did 2 intensive sessions. And by that time, because I was the only at that time in Ottawa, I was the only Native early childhood educator. And so Aboriginal Women's Support Center said, if you sober up and you're consistent for a year, we'll hire you. Even if you have relapse and you come back in a good way. And I was like, okay. So I took that as like, I'm getting ready to still go home, but I got to sober up. And even when I went home, I was in harm reduction because I was still relapsing, But when I got home, I took that as success. I don't, because no one explains what happens when you go home. You have a little bit of expectation, like they'll at least remember me. They might hug me. They might want to see me. But no one tells you, okay, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Like nobody tells you any of that. So when I went home, I just went to the band office in Pelican. And that I take as success because it was on my own. I didn't use any agency. My mom gave me this beautiful book on my birthday because I was going to be away for my birthday. And she made me this little book. And she gave me my dress that I was adopted in. And she's like, just in case. And I was like, I'm not going to meet anybody. I'm just going to go sit with elders. Because it's hard to tell her I wanted to go home. And she couldn't be in charge of it. She couldn't be anywhere near it. Don't want you anywhere near it. So she gave me this book to say, then show them where we took you. Show them. So I really appreciated that book because then I could show from the date of my adoption to where I was from when my sister got married. Like, this is where I went. This is where I lived. And my mom was like, what church did they take you to? And I was like, oh, I was raised in a United home, a United church home. And my mom was like, oh, you weren't raised Catholic. Like that was like a huge, huge surprise for her. And she's like, they didn't hurt you, did they? And I said, no, they didn't hurt me, but those homes did. And she's like, I didn't want that to happen. She said, they told me they sent you to the States. The worker told me, don't ever look for you because they sent you to the States. And then I told her I was raised in Saskatoon. And she was like, I would go to Saskatoon. And I was like, I went to the Friendship Center. She was like, I would go to the Friendship Center. So I always like, were we there? Like, I don't know. That's that crisscrossing times, you know. And then the pain of, because you had the first 7, and when she was signing what she thought to bring me home, she was signing papers to take me out. She didn't know that. And she was pregnant with my other brothers. And then when I went home, I asked her, because in my head, I'd always been told certain things. And I asked her, so when did you stop drinking? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel guilt about that. Because they told me she was a drunk. They told me these things. So I went in believing that. And she's like, when I had my grandkids, I stopped drinking. And then I just found out recently, like in the last 2 years, she would have 1 drink and that would be it throughout the whole evening. Like it wasn't a problem. Like these stereotypes and myths and what you're told as a child to go through this forest, this shrubbery of garbage to get to the clear of the pond and the house and the beautiful gardens, you know, that help us live, right? But she was afraid when I came home, like my adopted mom. She was afraid and my biological mom was afraid too. And I think my adopted mom had like myths, like we'll get together, we'll have gatherings, and I was like, you're not going to go anywhere near them. So I keep them, even though they come here, right? And I'll say, oh, I'm going to go see my sister. Like in my head, I know which sister, right? Oh, okay. And then I'll post something and my other sister, because social media, right? I'll post a picture of my sister and I'll say, my best sister ever, right? Because they are. They're my mothers, right? Even though this nice lady, she is one of my mothers, but I've now, like, they take precedent. These are my mothers. You filled out a form to be my mother. I don't trust your mother, right? These are my mothers, and these are the ones I trust. These are the ones that tell me stories about how I was held as a baby. And that's not your fault. And it's not fair for me to hold that over your head either, right? So I mothered Didnt as much as I could related to his Cree ancestry. You know, we're still learning about his Potawatomi ancestry, but he had a moss bag with my grandma's beadwork on it. I made a Tikanagan. I made moccasins for him right away. I fed him fish broth right away, goose broth. He was welcomed in with ceremony. That mothering felt normal to me. And yet I still go back to these mothers and go, is that normal? Is that what we do? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Because I don't want to get it wrong. Because there's damage of mothering. There's damage of our parenting. And then I tell him, I don't want you to get it wrong either. But I think that's a lot of pressure on him. Like he's just growing out of being a teenage. I don't want you to be a teenage dad. You know, like that's part of your dad's cycle. It wasn't part of your mom's cycle. Your dad's a teenage dad. And your brothers were teenage, like one of your brothers, you know, and there's complexities related to our family, our step families. Because you're family number 3. We're family number 3. Right? We're family number 3 because I'm wife number 3. So there's complexities there too. There's a lot of respect for all the mothers. But I say all the mothers, you know. Because we love him. His dad. And we love our kids. As best as we can. There's still stuff there, but yeah, success are broken down. There's still a lot of pieces that are still not successful. Still a lot of hidden pieces. And if we all knew, you know, like they always talk about, you know, the child as the center of the breath, right? And we're to protect that child. And yet you've had generations of Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis. They didn't protect us. And then the teaching today is protect the child. This is our tradition. This is our way. And you kind of are so grateful you can do that. Protect at all cost. Like protect them all. And find us all. Because there's some that died. They still carry their English name. Like there's so many we don't know. They didn't get asked. They weren't even asked. Do you think it was successful? Or did it break down? And where did you go? Who else do we need to charge? Who else do we need to, you know, and that I think is, for me, my part of that driving force, you know, because there's so much violence after that, right? Like, would my brother have died? What if that brother died? The stress and the guilt, would that brother have died? Would we have these conditions? Because I can't change it, right? Would we have like all these conditions? Like, I don't know. Like my grandpa was a strong, strong man. My granny was a strong, strong woman. But they still had their issues. Like she was married at 16. You know? And I can't go far back. I can only go 4 generations back behind me. I don't know anyone's name. And that's only on my mom's side. On my dad's side, I don't even know. So I don't even know if you call that success. Success that we don't know, right? Or feeling broken because you don't know. right? There's still like, there's that colonial success. You're right, she's successful. She doesn't know. So we succeeded. So I'm always trying to grow back into my rites of passage. Like my smiling ceremony, my walking in ceremony, my welcoming home ceremony. And last time before like COVID shut down the world, we were called home and they did a welcoming ceremony for my son and I. And I was thinking in my head, this is what I had wanted, but I had to wait this long because I had to be patient, because I had to see this through and not go away. And we were wrapped in blankets. You know, I spoke, my son performed, we sang. That was hard. And it was all in front of my family at the Friendship Center. So I'm very faithful to the Friendship Center. Like there's a faithfulness. Maybe it's a warped faithfulness, but they're still teaching me how to come home. And same thing with Minwash, and I have a loyalty to Aboriginal Women's Support Center. I grew up there, right? I even had the best breakup there. We did it with a counselor. I had the best breakup with my ex. It was the best breakup ever. I always tell people, you can break up with a counselor. Tell them, so that you have more eyes. It doesn't always have to be individual, isolated. We don't have to do that nowadays. You can even go Facebook Live.
Could we say that because you returned home and reconnected with your community, that in some ways your adopted family were just placeholders until this actual moment happened? Therefore, to some degree, it has been a success?
I like that word, placeholder. They may call it different. Because I was telling them, at a very young age, I'm not here for long. I still tell them that. I'm not here for long. I come visit. I'm only here for half an hour and then I gotta go. Right? Placeholders. I like that word.
And if they'd known they were just going to be placeholders, and that their burden wasn't to make sure that you were going to be a successful Indigenous person in Canada, then maybe they would have lessened the pressure on themselves. If they knew at some point you were going to go home anyway.
I was telling it to them, I think, since day one.
And they didn't believe it?
No. I think it's shown me how to be Cree. Shown me how to motivate myself to be community engaged. Encourage myself to stay. Back to like that wholeness. Because there was only pieces of me before. But now I feel whole. Like when I went home. Like even before that, I met my uncle. And he was telling me, you're from this territory. And this is the language. This is the ceremony. And I want you to come home to dance. And I had still no idea. I was helping in here. So I always think, from the time that I was out to the time that I've been home, because I was to my mom, I was missing for 27 years till I came home. and forcefully told, you don't look for her. Now I've been home for almost 27 years. So I'm always trying to remind myself you're living, breathing, growing up in this big city, and you're always going to be a Cree girl, no matter what. And nobody can tell you how to be Cree. It has to come from your people, your ceremony, your birthright, your namesake, your siblings. I know there's more there because it's going to come, but even when I was moose hiding just recently, like, I'm getting my first moose hide tools. Like, that's part of my namesake too. My granny was a moose hider that worked with my grandpa. You know, I really have to challenge myself because I'll get dirty. I'll smell things, and like, I really challenge myself, like, because I still have, like, I have to force myself to, again, there's things that you still want and you're still needing to go to really uncomfortable places because you have to touch it. You have to, you know, like, even when I'm doing certain things, and, you know, a lot are untouched ceremonies, you know, and then that consent, I have to always make sure people are aware of my actions, you know, because I never want to go in assuming that they know what to do.